Welcome to the Bourbon Talk Show, the ABV Network's original YouTube series where we interview some of the most interesting people from the world of bourbon. Today on the show, we are talking to noted author Maggie Kimbrell and Taconic Distillery head distiller Brandon Collins. My name is McNew. Please join me in welcoming our host for the evening, Steve Akeley.
Hello, how's everybody doing tonight? How's everybody doing?
I'm not great, Steve.
Yes. I want to thank our guest here, Maggie, who's had some fun even before the show. So maybe the best part of the show came before the show, Maggie, when you come on and you got a snake wrapped around your neck. It was amazing.
I caught wind that McNew was, having a little bit of anxiety, and I wanted to, do a little spiel about how great ball pythons are. And, also maybe see what reaction she had if I just showed up with a snake around.
Oh, it was classic. We should have recorded it.
It was worth it.
Yeah, no doubt. So much fun. And yes, and McNew, as you see that there, you can't be afraid. That snake looks as calm as can be. It's barely moving. I mean, it's
moving a lot.
It's just it moves very slow. It's not like it's
like I have goosebumps right now.
Oh man. So yeah, crazy stuff. So hello to Maggie. How are you doing tonight?
Doing great. How about you all?
Good. We're happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Of course, happy to see Mr. Brandon Collins too. Hey, Brandon, how you doing?
Brandon.
Good. How are y'all, man?
Good. Where do you fall on the snake thing? Are you favor snakes or you not so much?
Not so much.
Yeah. So you came on. We were, Maggie was already on. She had the snake around. You had me going, what am I getting myself into here? What did I sign up for tonight?
I mean, I can stand the look of them. I just don't like being around them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have a very fun show tonight, and we'll get to our guests in just a second here. We always like to kick this thing off with some of the happenings in the world of bourbon. We always do 3 stories that are the latest and the greatest. So first one up is the 2022 spring release of Heaven Hill's Old Fitzgerald Bottled and Bond Decanter theme is a 17-year-old offering. 17 years old. That's pretty cool. Suggested retail price is $185 if you can find it. That's the key on that stuff. What do you think about that, McNew? Are you a buyer at $185 if you would happen to? Maybe Chili's or one of your favorite liquor stores locally there gets one. And
yeah, I don't think that's an insane price for a 17-year-old, right?
Yeah, it's tough these days. Finding 17-year-old whiskey is tough. Yeah.
So if you can find it on the shelf for that, sure, why not? But I have actually never found one of these decanters in all the releases for the price that they're supposed to be. So good luck to me and everyone else.
Yeah, I the same thing. I think if I saw it, I think I would have to get one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't had a whole lot luck with these either. I've got a couple, especially at the distillery when they do it every day. Now it's they limit it to a couple days a week. It's even gotten harder to get stuff through the distillery. So I don't hold out any hope of getting one, but hopefully maybe a buddy will get one or something. You never know. You never know how you're going to get through these things, and maybe I'll get to try it. That'd be kind of nice. So there you go. On April 7th, Chattanooga Whiskey will be hosting a 10th anniversary party at its distillery. There'll be food, entertainment, drinks, a special 10th anniversary release, and tickets are only $10. You can pick them up on Eventbrite. That doesn't sound bad, does it, McNeil? $10?
No, that's exciting. I think it's appropriate. 10 years, $10. Go have a fun day if you're in Chattanooga or willing to drive there.
I've heard really good things about. I've tried their whiskey, very good. But what I heard is really kind of the highlight. If you go to the distillery, they have all these experiments and stuff like that. Now, I haven't tried any of those, but it sounds like that's really a cool thing to do.
Yeah,
so.
That sounds cool. I've had their samples. They're making great whiskey, but that does sound fun.
Yeah. So be on the lookout for them. 10 years. I didn't realize they're that old. I mean, that's something. You're in the business. You've been doing it 10 years, so that's not bad. Maggie's been watching a snake for 10 years. It's not even her snake.
That's true.
This is
not even my snake. I don't know how it got here.
I think after 10 years, it is your snake at that point.
Interestingly, these guys are going to be headed home soon.
Really?
So what happened, we were talking a little bit about this before the show. The reason I end up with so many great exotic pets and house plants and so on and so forth is my friends will move and they will leave, house plants or pets with their parents. And then their parents are like, I don't want these house plants or pets anymore, or I'm moving as well and can't take care of them. So I end up taking care of them on their behalf. So the two guys and I've had, I used to have an albino corn snake that I got that way. I used to have a South African giant pleated lizard that I got that way. He was real mad, the lizard. I'm not a lizard gal. Snakes I can deal with. These guys, I have two of them. They're ball pythons, and I have a male and a female. They're named Trinity and Neo. And I got them 10 years ago, approximately, when the person who owned them originally was going to go to California for 1 year to teach. And they ended up, staying a little bit longer and then moving a couple of times. And so they have settled now and bought a house. And I actually have a special box. There's a special box that you can use for shipping live harmless reptiles. And so they are going to be headed home as soon as the supply chain allows their new tank to be delivered. So it's been about 10 years, and we've had a lot of really great times with them. They're really great ambassadors. Ball pythons are, number one, great pets if you have kids who are into reptiles or anything like that. Some people call them the pet rock of the snake world because they literally will this is about as active as they ever get. And, if you leave them in their tank for a week while you go on vacation, as long as they've got water and their lights go on and off, you're good. There's a little bit of care that is involved in this, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. You dangle a rat in front of them about once every 3 to 4 weeks, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So they're very, very enjoyable pets. And one of the things I like to do when you travel with them, you put them into a pillowcase. So I like to show up at Cub Scouts or elementary school or something like that with a pillowcase. And everybody's like, what's in the pillowcase? And I'm like, you'll see. So, yeah.
Has she convinced you yet, McNew, to be into the snakes or not?
Nope, I'm barely hanging on right now.
I'm barely hanging on.
This is about as intimidating. Now there are certainly some other species of snakes that I would not recommend, especially for beginners. These are a really great beginner pet. No matter what kind of pet you want. So they're very easy to take care of, very easy to interact with, low, almost no danger whatsoever. So we really enjoy them. We've really enjoyed having them for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Our last story is earlier this month, Wally Dant was on hand to watch a crane lift a 24-inch diameter, 33-foot tall column still into his home at Log Still Distillery. That's going to be a great place to go, isn't it, McNew? They're really doing some cool stuff there.
It is. And it's on my agenda. I hope I can get there this summer. I wanted to go last summer, but you know how we get booked up with everything. So hopefully I can make it July or August. I definitely want to check them out.
Yes. Yeah. So they've got a lot going on. I want to go where you actually stay there, because they have, one of the amenities that they have is they got some bed and breakfast type places you can stay on property, which is cool, and restaurant and amphitheater.
Gorgeous. They did such a good job with the building and decorating. It looks just like a whiskey wonderland, really.
Yeah. So really a neat place, and it certainly helps elevate the bourbon industry. As new players come in, and especially doing a good job like that, it just makes things better and better for everybody, I think. So it's exciting. So
yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, that wraps up what's going on in the world of bourbon news. It's time now to introduce our guest. Our first guest is coming off a year serving as president of Bourbon Women, is a noted author and presence in the world of bourbon. Please join me in welcoming Maggie Kimbrell. Hello. Hey, Maggie.
Hey.
How you doing?
I just handed off the snake to my son so McNew can take a deep breath.
Thank you.
McNew can stop hyperventilating. So yeah.
Deep cleansing breath. Deep cleansing breath.
Yes. So yeah, obviously, we've talked already about the snakes. You seem like a big proponent of it. It sounds like a great pet. How old were your sons when you got them? You're talking 10 years ago. So how old were they?
So my kids are 12 and 14, about to turn 13 and 15.
Okay.
So they are pretty lit. I think we got them actually on my oldest son's 5th birthday.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, we've been taking care of them for about 10 years, and they've been great pets. We've really enjoyed having them. But it's time for them to get back to their original owner so they can enjoy them for the last few years that they're going to be around. They're nearing the end of their lifespan. So their natural lifespan is somewhere in the 20 to 25 range. So he's 20 and my girl that I didn't bring on, Trinity, is 15.
15. Okay. So, and help me make this point one last time, because McNew and I have had this debate. Matter of fact, it's been pulled in the Bourbon Talk Show a little bit. What's worse, snakes or mice and rats? And McNew has been steadfast that snakes are worse. If a snake ever got in your house, it's way. And I'm like, no, rats or mice are way worse. They're dirty.
Rats definitely. Mice definitely worse in my opinion, and kind of that kind of informs how I ended up in the situation, because the kids wanted a pet rat. And I said, I will only get a rat in this house if we are feeding it to a snake.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, well, can we get a snake? And I was like, oh, well, I just walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yeah, you did. Maggie, what kind of pets did you have as a kid when you were growing
up? Not a whole lot. I mean, we had cats. When I was little, we had dogs sometimes, but not like, we didn't keep them for a long time for some reason. I don't know what the backstory is there.
Behavioral issues, probably.
Well, yeah. I mean, somebody was misbehaving.
Yeah.
Probably wasn't the dog. But we did have cats. And then when I moved in with my dad, we lived on a farm. And so I like to refer to this as my dad's ADHD hobby farm. Right. So it was like, we started off with a couple of horses and some cats. And then one day there was a duck in my kitchen. And then it was alive in a cage. And then there were more ducks, and then there were chickens. And then I went away to college and I came home and there were goats. And then I moved out and I came back and there were cows. And then I moved out and then I, came back a couple years later and there were pigs. So, I've experienced the whole range of livestock and pets. Yes.
Yeah. So Maggie, you and I have known each other for a while, and I know your personal story. I got to be a host, so I have to ask questions, even if you think I've told them this before. And I do know that your first foray really into working in bourbon, you could say, is you worked at a liquor store, but yes. that's just being an employee, and that could be interchanged with any job. You worked at a pet store, a grocery store. Sure. But when did you really start getting into the world of bourbon? And then the second part to that question is, do you remember the first time you actually got paid for something other than like working at the liquor store? Because that was where you got paid for that. But
absolutely, yeah. So I mean, when I was working in the liquor store, I was trying to figure out what kind of marketable skills I could learn there for when I started my real job. That was definitely a real job. And I worked very hard when I was doing that, even though it was part-time. But I worked part-time at the liquor store when my kids were little because there were no kids there. And that was great. So I went in wanting to learn about wine, actually, because I thought like, hey, I have a lot of food service experience already. So maybe if I learn about wine, then, that can kind of help me level up in my career. And I quickly realized that wine people were not my people. Right. And, got a little bit into craft beer, and also realized craft beer dudes are, a little almost as intense as the wine people.
Oh, yeah.
One of my coworkers yelled at me because I drank beer out of a bottle instead of putting it in a glass. And I was like, okay, we're done with this now. And I was really into the farm to table movement. I was really into, I always had a big garden. I grew a lot of vegetables. I did a lot of canning and preserving of vegetables and all that sort of thing. So I was really into the locavore movement specifically, trying to eat things that are close to home. And I kind of started looking at the bourbon aisle one day and I said, hey, they make this right down the street. I should probably learn about it. And that was back in the days, this was probably 2010 when I started there. So It's been about 12 years. And that was back when the master distillers would go and sit in the liquor store and sign bottles and nobody knew who they were.
Yeah.
So, I got to meet like Jimmy Russell, and Chris Morris made me a mint julep one time. And, I was meeting all these guys just in the liquor store during my normal shift. And it was great. Because, I could hear them, the conversations that they were having, and I could ask them questions and all that sort of thing. And so, I hate to beat this dead horse. I feel like I've told this story a million times, but the way that I ended up transitioning from that into writing was Jim Rutledge was in my store back when he was still with Four Roses. This would have been probably about 2011, 2012. And it was Derby week. And every time I would try to go talk to him, a whole horde of people would come in, and I would have to go right back to the cash register. And so that went on the entire like 3 or 4 hours that he was there. So I went and sat down in the break room eating my sad little peanut butter sandwich. And the next thing I knew, Jim Rutledge came through the door with bottles in one hand and cups in the other hand. And he was like, "You didn't get to do my tasting." And so he actually sat down with me for like 20 minutes, taught me the proper bourbon tasting technique, taught me a little bit about the history of Four Roses, why they have 10 different recipes, which ones are in this bottle and what you can taste, and which ones are in this bottle and what you can taste. And I was like, this is amazing. I have to tell the whole world about this. And so I quit my job and started writing about whiskey. So I got a job as a writer for Louisville.com, which was an extension of Louisville Magazine.
Mhm.
And the first story I think I published was maybe top 10 bourbon bars in Louisville.
Yeah.
And I think I made $4 to do that article.
$4,
So,
yes.
And so I did that for like a month, and then I was like, yeah, I mean, this is a lot of work for not a lot of money. And then they're like, oh, hey, how about if we give you a tiny raise? So I think I was making like $10 an article after that. And I did that for like 3 years. And then I moved on to the Whiskey Wash and Alcohol Professor, and then started with Whiskey Magazine about 7 years ago now, I think, and have been with them ever since, and helped to launch American Whiskey Magazine, where I'm now the content editor.
Yeah. When you're doing, a job like you have, it can be tough to define. So imagine you bumping into somebody maybe you hadn't been in touch with since grade school or something like that. What do you say you do? Because you host events, you write, you have a job with the magazine. There's a lot of different things you do. How would you quickly summarize what you do for a living?
Well, so my defense mechanism is that I just kind of go, what are you doing now? Because
Right.
like, I feel like it's too much.
Right.
It's too, and at a certain point, like it really kind of feels like I'm bragging, because my life is literally most people's fantasy camp.
Mhm.
So, like in a nutshell, my elevator pitch is I'm the content editor of American Whiskey Magazine and a contributing editor to Whiskey Magazine. And I am a freelancer for a bunch of different spirits publications. And I judge, whiskey competitions and cocktail competitions and teach classes about spirits.
Right. Yeah. It does sound pretty fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I almost feel
right?
bad saying that. And I'm like, so tell me about your job as an accountant. That sounds neat.
Yeah.
I have to pick on accountants. My husband's an accountant. So
Yeah, absolutely. So earlier this year, you finished out your term as president of Bourbon Women. Tell us a little bit about your time there and what it was like.
it was really great. So that was actually my first experience of being part of an enthusiast group. So I've never been an enthusiast. I didn't start in this job because I was an enthusiast. I started because like I wanted to tell the story of Kentucky bourbon. So it's always been a profession for me. And so it was really interesting to me to get to know the enthusiast side of what's going on out there, because, I spend a lot of time with enthusiast groups, and I go on barrel picks with enthusiast groups, and I go to the events that they put on and things like that. But I had really never, and I didn't realize this until I was actually, like a month in. I was like, oh, hey, this is different than what I'm used to, right?
Right.
So, I learned a lot about enthusiast groups and, that kind of relationship between brands and enthusiast groups. The enthusiast groups are doing a lot of great work for the industry as well. The work that these enthusiast groups out there are doing is really, really important. Bourbon Women has the only women focused consumer whiskey show in the United States, or probably in the world, as far as, I've never heard of another one.
Right.
So they have the Symposium conference that happens every August, and it's all women. It's an all women whiskey show. And it's really refreshing, because you don't get a whole lot of those dude bros who like know more than you.
Right.
When you're in that crowd, it's all these people who are just like inspired and inspiring. So it's really neat. And then you have, groups like Kobe and the Black Bourbon Society and things like that. These are bringing segments of the consumer population that have really been, underserved, mainly because, I think brands didn't know what to do with them for a long time. And so these enthusiast groups are really important. And so it was a good perspective for me to really see the work that enthusiast groups were doing and how important that was and how that kind of functioned from the inside.
Yeah. And it's such an important group. It's a large group. It had to take up a lot of time. I'm sure the past year has been focused just about exclusively on that.
It was a full-time job.
Yeah,
It was a full-time salaried position. Absolutely. And like there were other people. I was the only full-time salaried person who worked in that organization, but we had lots of contractors and part-time people and management companies and all that sort of thing, because it is a huge organization. There, as of the last time I checked, there were members in 39 states in Australia, and 15 branches, including the Louisville branch. So it was a massive organization. All these branches had, sometimes hundreds of people in them. So it was a very large machine that was kind of always in motion.
Yeah. So what do you do as you leave that? You've got this extra time. Are you rededicating your stuff to the things that you worked on before? Are you trying to do new things? Tell us about, to give us an update where you're at today.
So before I started, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I spent 7 years in a marketing startup that was actually just received a major award. They were named #1 content marketing firm, I believe worldwide. Which I just saw today, which I'm very proud of, because that was a startup that I joined and I worked there for 7 years. So I quit that in 2020. Is that correct? Yeah, 2020. I have to think what year we're in. We're kind of in this time warp still. I quit that at the end of 2020 because I wanted to write a book. I'd been doing all the, online stuff and magazines and all that sort of thing. And I kind of wanted to focus, take some time and focus and get, pen to paper and start working on a book. And so then 2 weeks after I quit, I was approached about, becoming the president of Bourbon Women. And I was like, well, obviously I can't pass that up. So I did that for a year. And then, but, there was kind of this feeling like, I really need to get back to that book, and I'm not going to have time if I keep doing this. I can't do both. I can still do the magazine and do Bourbon Women, but I can't, I need a lot of bandwidth to churn out this book. So I've actually been working on a book, and I'm about 10,000 words into what I'm shooting for, a 20,000 word book right now, and about to start another one. And I actually sold a book contract last year, but was not able to sign it because I couldn't get all the necessary permissions that I needed from the places that I needed to do the research.
Yeah.
And I finally just got through to the folks that I needed to there just last week. So that one's going to be moving forward. And I'm really excited about that, because that was one, I was going to walk away from it, but I was not going to be happy about it. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep trying a little bit longer. And, so hopefully we'll get everything in place for that, so that can happen.
Well, congrats on that. Can't wait to learn more as information becomes available. Well, guess what? It's time for a McNew question, something new we added this season. McNew asked a question to our guests right in the middle of the interview. So McNew, what do you got today?
Yeah, so my original question was, what's your dream job? But I'm going to change it to, can you tell us what the book's about? Just a hint.
Ooh.
Oh, geez.
You know what? I feel like, not because I want to be secretive, but because I don't want to, there are a lot of people who know that I've talked to about it. Well, I guess I can go ahead and say the one that I'm working on, that I'm almost finished with, I'm working on an American whiskey and cigar pairing book. That's something that I've been, I've been teaching that class at the New Orleans Bourbon Festival. I started that 6 years ago, started writing about this even longer ago with Michael Veach, and I write the whiskey and cigar pairings for the magazine. I've been doing that since the beginning, and we're 18 issues in. Is this 18? This is this is 17. So we're 17 issues in. And so I've been doing this for quite some time. And as far as I know, there's really nothing out there that addresses this in a meaningful way. So that's what I'm working on right now. I hope nobody comes along and steals my book idea, but if they do, they're not going to be as good at it as I am.
Exactly.
So steal away.
Right. Exactly.
No, it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Maggie, you just mentioned Mike Veach. And how did you get to become friends with Mike?
So back when I was a beat writer with Louisville.com, I really just covered the bourbon beat. The nice thing about that job, even though it paid like garbage, was I had a lot of freedom. So I got to choose what I wrote about. And so I just kind of leveraged that to say, you know what, the bourbon thing's happening right now, and really nobody's covering this on a local basis consistently. And so that's going to be my place. And so I just, anytime I was invited to an event, I showed up. And I would write about it, and there were a lot of events going on back then, in the before times, as we like to say. And so I started going to a bunch of Michael Veach's events. He was still working at the Filson Historical Society at that point. And so they would have, different events at different venues where they would have him come out, and they would, talk about bourbon history. And then, they have a massive collection of aged whiskeys that they would oftentimes pull out and pour. So not only was I getting to learn history through him, I was also getting to try history, which was great. And then I was writing about it. And so, I kept seeing him. And one of the things, I'm very SEO oriented because of, the marketing job that I had. So I always want to make sure that, like if you have a business, I would like to link to it. Because I want you to get that recognition and, let people know where to find you. So I would always say, hey, do you have a website? And he was like, no, I'm working on it. And so after, it was probably a year of, how's that website coming along?
Right.
When I was finally like, can I just build you a website? It'll take me like 3 hours. So I took my laptop over and sat at his kitchen table and just built him a website. And I was like, okay, here's your website. He's like, cool. Can you just run it for me? So I've been running his website ever since. And, that's one of the things that I think I'm most proud about in my career, because here's a guy who just has so much to say and so much knowledge. And, he was not getting the opportunity to really share that enough, certainly not as much as he wanted to. And so, I just approached it as, I'm your IT guy and you just write the words. I'll do, I edit him and I do all of his like SEO and all that sort of thing. And, but just, put it out there to the world. And his traffic has grown 50% year over year since it started. And so he is at a place now, I think he's probably getting like 40 or 50,000 hits a month now.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maggie, you live in this world of bourbon, so sometimes you have insight. The casual fan doesn't get her. There's probably people who don't get to travel to go to distilleries and that. What's a distillery that you'd like to recognize as one to watch out for? Or if you're coming to this area, make sure you hit this distillery because they're doing some cool things.
Gosh, that's a really hard one for me. Some of these I haven't been to, but I know that I know the people and I know the passion and that sort of thing. So I actually made myself a little list, and I want to go over a couple of them.
Fair enough.
Old Dominick, obviously, Alex Castle, boss. She is a boss.
Yep.
Watershed Distillery in Ohio. They're making some really interesting stuff. One of the most intriguing things they've come out with recently is a Burchino. So they had a Nocino liqueur, which was walnut liqueur, and they made that with a vodka base. That was the tradition, and so they have switched to making that with a bourbon base now, and so that's really exciting to me. They also have a really great ready to drink old fashioned, which was probably one of the best that I tried. Swilled Dog, Brook Glover. They started off as a cidery, and they're making some rye whiskey, some bourbon, and they're doing a really nice job. Company Distilling is one that I'm really excited about. A bunch of big name talent has gone into that distillery, and they're actually going to build a pretty large distillery And I think they're probably going to be releasing a product here pretty soon if they haven't already.
Okay.
Leopold Brothers, I know, like if you're a whiskey geek, you know Leopold Brothers, but that 3-chamber rye
Oh
that
my
just
gosh.
came out was something
Amazing.
special,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Widow Jane, not a small distillery by any means, just got bought up by Heaven Hill along with Few and a couple of others. But Widow Jane, their 10-year-old bourbon just won World Whiskies Awards for best small batch bourbon. So that's definitely something to watch. Lisa Wicker has an amazing
She's
palate.
amazing. Yeah.
And she's done really great things with that brand, and her blends are just perfection.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm a big Lisa Wicker fan. Iron Root Republic, another World Whiskies winner. They actually won best bourbon in the world a couple of years ago at World Whiskies, but they won best corn whiskey this year. And they're just making, I love the Licorice family so much. And Marsha Licorice actually just won an Icons of Whiskey award, I believe, for visitor center manager. Don't quote me on that, but
Okay.
she just got an Icons of Whiskey. So great family, love what they're doing there. Woodinville, I haven't been there, but they're making some phenomenal whiskeys. They're rating very highly in the blind reviews in American Whiskey Magazine, and they're really good. They're making really good stuff. One of the people that I want to highlight is Brittany Penny. She's the first Black woman to be the CEO of a Kentucky bourbon brand ever. Her brand is The Nine, and she's making she is sourcing some really amazing stuff and doing the blending herself. But the thing that impresses me the most about her is she came up with this idea when she had a newborn and the baby wasn't sleeping, and she was like, you know what, if I'm not sleeping, I'm just gonna go ahead and start a company. And I was like, I wasn't even human again until my kids started kindergarten, and she's starting a company with a newborn. So that's
a great story.
Incredibly impressed with her, and everybody should get to know Brittany Penny.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are some good ones, and I'm pleased to note that there were several on there that I didn't know, so I need to do my homework and find out a little bit more about them. So that's good stuff. So glad we asked that question. Who are some of your friends in the bourbon industry? This is always interesting. You got some friends?
That's a hard one for me, right? Because I feel like we're all friends, but then, like, you know, I'm not like having sleepovers at their house painting our toenails either, though, right? So, I mean, you know, we've got our good friend Fred Mosenter on here. He's a friend. Hi, Fred.
Oh yeah, Fred.
You know, there are a lot of amazing people in this industry, and I really just enjoy getting to know them. Steve Bayshore at Mount Vernon Distillery and Grist Mill is probably one of my best friends in the industry. He lets me come bug him at work after we judge World Whiskies together on a Thursday every year, and then on a Friday every year I go bug him at work all day, and I'll row mash in the distillery with him. And you know, it's a lot of fun, and I learned so much from him. But yeah, there are a lot of really great people in this industry. I mean, I wouldn't want to slight anybody by starting to name a bunch of names and accidentally leaving anybody out.
Right. Yeah, I get it. You know, there's so many great stories from bourbon history. And I think that there's been enough for us as bourbon fans to have a whole channel dedicated to that. But that it's not a big enough market, I guess, to have something that's big. But if you could narrow it down to one, if there's one story that could be told in a feature-length movie, what movie would you focus on? What do you think would be the story that should be told via movie?
Mary Dowling.
Mary Dowling. Okay.
Do you know about Mary Dowling?
No.
McNew, do you know about Mary? Oh my gosh, I can't believe you guys don't know about. Okay, we're producing this movie now.
Is the Prohibition one? Is she the one?
Yeah, so Mary Dowling
to Mexico
owned Waterfill and Fraser, pre-Prohibition in Tyrone, Kentucky. And when Prohibition hit, she grabbed her still and she grabbed a beam because there was an abundance of beams at that time. and went down to Juarez, Mexico, and started making Waterfill and Fraser bourbon in Mexico. And it was made, Waterfill and Fraser was made in Mexico until that 1964 concurrent resolution that declared bourbon a distinct product of the United States. So, you know, one, bourbon has not always been made in the United States. Before 1964, it was made both in Mexico and Canada. But Mary Dowling was like, you know, I'm not going to take this lying down. I'm not going to give up my business, because back then, you know, she inherited this business from her husband, if I recall correctly, but she would not have been able to just go out and start another business, you know, and especially, you know, with beverage alcohol, and even, you know, post-prohibition, if she had tried to ride it out, you know, the regulations about that came about really mostly post-prohibition would have put her out of business anyway. So she was really smart and had a lot of foresight to say, you know what, I'm not going to sit around and wait for this to change. I'm just going to hightail it out of here and keep living my life. And so she's a really amazing individual. If you've ever been to Vendome, they have her copper doubler on their porch, just like sitting out. Mary Dowling's doubler, no big deal.
Yeah.
So, and I keep telling them, like, can you just build a museum and like make that the centerpiece? Because I feel like that's a pretty significant piece of bourbon history you have just chilling on the back porch.
Yeah.
So, but I think she's an absolutely amazing character, and I would love to see a movie made of her life.
Yeah, no, that would be very interesting for sure. So that would be a fun story. And yeah, the tie-ins to Beams and all that cool stuff. And yeah, I love it. All right, the last question is always a fun one. We like to, again, kind of get to know our guests a little bit better. What would be your go-to dessert?
You know what? I'm doing keto right now.
Okay.
So I can't have sugar, but I've learned to make a lot of desserts with stevia. And by I've learned, I mean, I've taught my husband. I send him recipes and then he cooks it for me. So like right now I've got a keto chocolate mousse.
Okay.
I love chocolate mousse, but I also love a really good pavlova. Do you know what a pavlova is?
I do not know.
So actually, I learned about this dessert from Beach's fiance, Rosemary Miller. So she actually brought this over to my house one time when we had them over for dinner. And it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like a meringue, but instead of being on top of a pie, you kind of form it into its own little shell, and it's like nice and crispy and crunchy. And then you put some berries and then some whipped cream. It's absolutely lovely and fairly easy to make keto.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Have you figured out a way with Splenda to make a creme brulee? That's my favorite one. Yeah.
Ooh, you know what? Well, because with the creme brulee, that would
It's
be
got the sugar
hard
on
because
top,
you have to have that crystallized sugar.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how that would work otherwise.
That'd be an
Because
experiment.
I
Yeah.
love cooking with fire. Don't get me
Right.
wrong. I love blow torches in the kitchen. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Maggie, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll have you back at the end where you could share any contact
Okay.
information, that type of thing. Okay. Let's hear
Sounds
it from
good.
Maggie
Thanks for
Kimball,
having me
everybody. Absolutely. Hey-oh. All right. What we'll do next, we'll take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to be talking to Brandon Collins. We'll do that in just a few.
Today's show is sponsored by Moonshine University. Moonshine University offers programs to assist individuals in the bourbon industry or simply fans wanting to step up their knowledge. Whether you are looking for in-person learning in the classrooms of Moonshine University or self-study online, there are options to fit your unique needs. Check them out at moonshineuniversity.com. We are also sponsored by the ABV Networks Distiller Summit in Key West, Florida. This 6-day event features events and networking opportunities from January 24th through 30th, 2023. But there's no better place in the world to be than sunny Key West. Get more information on our website at abvnetwork.com.
Yeah, definitely get it out there. We've got a hotel block that we just get to keep it till May. So that's after that they release it because we don't guarantee it. So because we're not willing to put up our own money to guarantee it. So if you're interested in Key West, now would be a great time to get that hotel room and secure your spot. And don't worry, if you decide later on you can't go, you can cancel it all the way up to like a month out, but be a good time to commit to getting that room locked up. So it should be a fun time in Key West. It always is. McNew's making a return. She didn't get to go last year because she worked 5 different careers in 6 months. Leading up to that, had no vacation time. No vacation time. He's back next year though, so he's got that fixed. So that's good. It's good. All right, our next guest used his degree in chemical engineering from Ohio State University, or the Ohio State, as they like to call it, into a job as a distillery supervisor for Buffalo Trace. After discovering a love for New York during his travels, he decided to move to New York, where he works today for Taconic Distillery in Stanfordville, New York. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brandon Collins. Hey, Brandon, how you doing, man?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you here. And so tell us a little bit about this thing. You grew up in Carlisle, Ohio, I see, but you moved to New York in 2017. So as you make this move, are there things that you miss from home back in Ohio and you're in New York?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, I always had a plan to get out of Ohio all the way back to high school. So Ohio is a really good place to grow up, but a better place to leave.
Okay.
As you can see, like over the last 2 or 3 decades, Ohio's been steadily just losing people.
Yeah. Do you have family back there and stuff? Is it a place that you return to for those type of things?
Yeah. So I still have all my parents and all my aunts and uncles are back in between Ohio and Kentucky. So
Gotcha.
They'll go back in that area a lot throughout the year.
Okay. So you're making visits whether you like it or not, right? You still have those roots and those connections there. So that's cool.
Yeah.
All right. I spend a little bit too much time in Ohio too. So I've got my in-laws live there, and then I got a brother-in-law and both sides of the state. So so I spend a little time in Ohio as well. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Tell us a little bit about your job at Buffalo Trace. What exactly was your role there?
So as a distillery supervisor, I worked directly underneath Harlan while I was there. So I worked there for about 4 years. Got to be over top of Warehouse X as responsible for the second shift production. So when I got hired on, we just started the second shift production and the distillery portion of it. So I was back there running with a group of about 17 guys. Pretty much all of them were brand new to the distillery side of it. They had been working in bottling or other portions of the plant. So I got to help teach them and learn myself over that time, and really got to know the process really well, and really got to do a whole lot of experiments and everything while I was there as well.
Yeah. Well, of course, when you're talking about Buffalo Trace and Harlan Wheatley, man, they do a lot of experiments. So it had to be a cool opportunity for you learning the business. That's a neat thing. Tell us a little bit about working for Harlan Wheatley. What was it like? What was the man like? I mean, he's so fascinating for people like me because, I'm so into bourbon. I listen to podcasts, I make podcasts, I read blogs, I do everything, but Harlan doesn't participate in a whole lot of that stuff. So he's kind of got this little mysterious aura, despite the fact he's making some of the greatest whiskey in the world, some of the most coveted things that are out there. So tell us a little bit, behind the scenes about working with Harlan.
Yeah, I think it's just mainly because he's kind of a reserved guy, so he kind of likes to keep to himself. And as Sazerac has so many people that can talk to the press, so he's kind of sheltered by all those people that he can kind of pawn off to other people to delegate those duties a little bit, right? So
right.
He definitely likes to have his alone time and separation from work and family and having that time off. So even like going to trade shows, like we'll send other people to trade shows more often than not than Harlan having to go to himself, because I know he gets busy where he travels so much that he tries to just have some time off and stay at home for a little while.
I get it. And I'm not being critical of it at all, because your ability to make great whiskey, and that's really all that we need him to do, right? In his role, doesn't mean that you enjoy, speaking in public or doing classes or whatever they want them to do, host dinners, there's all kinds of things they ask distillers to do these days. So I get it. And I just want the opportunity to talk to him at some point, because I respect what he does. So that's why I want to talk to him. And hopefully he gets some of that too. He knows that people like him and they're interested in him. I don't know how connected he is.
Yeah. I mean, he understands what's going on out there, and
that's
he
cool.
knows that people like him. It's just, he likes to have that separation too.
Yeah, makes sense. Tell us a little bit about this journey to New York. So what I read that you enjoyed traveling there, you decided to make that your home, but tell us a little bit about what meant so much to you there, why you liked it so much. And then how do you then hook up with Taconic Distillery?
Yeah, so we came up for my 30th birthday. That was the first time I ever been to New York City.
Okay.
And just about a year before that, I had traveled to Europe, and that was my first time ever in Europe and seeing, like, being able to walk around everything, right? So that was amazing to me, and I never had seen that before in my life. And once I got to New York, and you had all those same similarities that you have in Europe, to where you can walk around. You have so many different cultures here. So for me, growing up in a town of about 5,000 people and only having one stoplight, it's a big transition for me, but it was something that I really enjoyed. And I just was like, all right, I gotta move there. So it took about a year after we visited New York before I found a job up in New York. And I really wanted to stay in distilling. So that's why it took forever for me to do that. So I ended up even working out in Long Island at another distillery in between Buffalo Trace and Taconic. And they were doing whiskeys, but they also did vodkas and gins and all kinds of stuff. And it was just getting too much to where we spreading ourselves a little bit too thin, that I didn't like doing all those processes. So, and then Taconic was hiring a head distillers. And I got to basically come back to just making whiskey again. Yeah. And our still setup that we have, it's a Vendome column still. So it's 12-inch Vendome column still with a pot doubler. So it's similar setup that I was used to in Kentucky. So it was just like basically going back home, but being in New York. So
yeah. So you go there, and another interesting character to follow, because you got Paul Coughlin, great guy, one of the nicest people you ever met, but he's kind of a type A personality. He's super athlete, has completed all these Ironman things and stuff like that. So what's it like working for him? What's he like? And of course you're following him because he was the distiller too as the company started. So yeah. you're taking over basically his role as he gets more of a company owner. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, he understood that he was very limited on distillation experience, right? So he knew he needed to bring somebody in that could help him increase the business. And just having my pedigree of working at Buffalo Trace,
that's pretty good.
It's pretty easy. Yeah, it's pretty easy for me to get that job. Right. But yeah, working for him, it's been great because he knows that he can kind of be a little more hands off and allow me to control day-to-day stuff. So it's kind of nice to where it's more like I get to kind of run my own distillery, even though I'm not having to foot the bill for anything. So Paul's just putting out all the cost of everything and making sure we run. And I just basically develop the plan and say, this is what we need to do over the next couple of years to be able to expand the growth that we have right now. So.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And it sounds like he gives you great support there and the tools that you need to make the great whiskey you guys are making. And of course, it's showing up in all the awards and stuff like that you guys are winning. So very, very good stuff. Well, guess what? We're halfway through the interview. So that means it's time for our McNew question. McNew, here's your time.
Yep. So do you have a favorite product that you've created? Anything that you would consider as your baby?
So the first baby that I got to work on when I was there, since we already had some products out. So I've tried to keep all the same recipes as we were doing. So I just helped improve quality and efficiency on the stills. But the first one I had was our Mizunara finished bourbon.
Oh yeah,
that was
I remember that when that came out. Yeah.
Yeah, I visited a local cooper that I knew from back in the day when I worked at Buffalo Trace. This guy that made Titan barrels. Mm-hmm. He had some Mizunara wood, and I was like, all right. I was like, I gotta pull this in. I was like, I've never seen anybody use this, and now everybody's kind of using it in the bourbon world. So I was like, I gotta try this out, do it, and it works out great for the way his barrels are designed because it's American oak heads, but Mizunara staves in a stainless steel container because Mizunara is very leaky. And so I don't have to deal with that problem as much as everybody else does with Mizunara.
Yeah. Yeah. Brandon, when you have a group coming in, you can't get too much into the weeds because you don't know that maybe they're there just with a group of friends, and some of them might not even really be into whiskey. They're just kind of, with their friends doing something. So, but our group's a little bit different. If you think about people that are going to seek out and watch something on YouTube, an hour and a half program where people are talking about, they're really into it. So that's what we find when we do events and things like that. We've got people that are really into it. So tell us some of the things. You talked a little bit about your still, the pot still with the doubler and that, but tell us a little bit about the things that people would enjoy seeing if they come to your distillery.
I mean, so we're a New York farm distillery. So for us, that means we have to use at least 75% New York grain. And we actually do some grain to glass on site. So we grow about 20 acres of corn on site for us. So you got to actually see the corn growing in the fields during the summers, and then we harvest it late fall, early winter to use throughout the beginning of winter time there. So it's really, you get to see a full scale process in a very tiny space. So we're doing everything in about a 7,000 square foot building, and you get to see start to stop all in the same day, which is usually not something that you get to see in the bigger distilleries, or you have to walk big distances in between, and they have a designated building towards the still, designated building towards the cookers.
You're all right there. Everything's there.
Yeah, everything's right there. Like, we're in a very tight space, and we're run by 2 production people. So it's myself and my assistant distiller, and that's it. And we make about 800 barrels a year right now.
Yeah. So we, of course, we've talked about the fact you worked for Harlan Wheatley, and I think that maybe he's doing more experiments than anybody. You actually were in charge of Warehouse X, which is where all those experiments end up residing. So tell us a little bit about Taconic. Are you doing a bunch of experiments and things like that? Do you bring that as part of your role as a distiller now? Are you continuing to do those type of things?
Yeah, so it took a little bit of coaxing with Paul a little bit there in the beginning. So I didn't get to experiment too much at first. It took about a year and a half before I got into the role and was just making whiskey, and he understood and I knew what I was doing.
Right. There's a little freedom then, yeah.
Yeah, so I convinced him, let's do a single malt and let's do a wheated bourbon. So just knowing the good old fashioned wheated bourbon recipes that Buffalo Trace knows, I took some of that experience and modified it a little bit so it's not infringing on anything. And then I took some stout recipes that I used to homebrew back in college.
Okay.
And add into my single malt recipe. So it's got a lot of different complex grains into that. It's different than most single malts would be. So it's got a lot of different flavor, and is designed to basically go into an American new oak barrel versus a lot of single malts. You want to use a used barrel or like a wine barrel or something like that to pick up some lighter flavors, so that way you're not overpowering the grain.
There's many aspects, as we talked about too already tonight, for that distiller role. Not only are you distilling, but you're also doing some personnel things. So you got people that report up to you. You're responsible for the equipment and making sure that's running, forecasting and stuff like that. Sounds like you're doing some of that, experiments, and then things like this, being on the Bourbon Talk Show or doing an interview for a podcast or whatever it is. So tell us, what are some of your favorite parts of the job, and then the least favorite parts of the job?
Yeah, I mean, it's just being able to distill every day is a great job to have. I mean, there's not many jobs that you can beat that with, and especially where I'm at a craft distillery now versus being a distillery supervisor. I'm not sitting behind a desk. I'm going to do everything hands-on and basically use my knowledge instead of coercing somebody else to do what we needed them to do. It's a great job. I mean, it's hard to say there's any bad parts, but the only bad days is when stuff doesn't go right. Like if equipment breaks down, those are the only bad parts that's really tough, because then you're there for 14, 16 hours at a time versus getting in and out an 8 or 10 hour day.
Right. Things that are out of your control just happens, and you got to deal with it. There's no way around it. You just got to deal with it. So I get
you
that.
You can do all the maintenance in the world and all the preventative maintenance in the world, but sometimes rat chews through a temperature wire, and then your whole chiller is down for the day.
And it's never a snake chews. It's always again, snakes win. Snakes win. Yes. So, you've had the opportunity now to make Kentucky bourbon. You made New York bourbon. We're not going to ask you which is your favorite. There's no answer. There's no right or wrong answer there, really. But just compare and contrast a little bit the differences that you've seen. And of course, you're talking about one of the biggest scales in the world versus a small scale. That stands out right away. But what are some other things that you think are different in New York and Kentucky?
I mean, in New York, we're not really shooting to be Kentucky bourbon. I mean, Kentucky bourbon's had hundreds of years of experience and a way bigger head start.
Absolutely.
Than New York bourbon.
You can respect what they're doing. I love that too. Yeah.
New York's only been doing this for about 15 years. So, I mean, there's a big difference there, and just the scale wise and the age wise as it goes on too. And Kentucky bourbon is very usually light in the secondary grain. So you usually don't have a very heavy secondary grain. It's more corn heavy. A lot of the bourbons up in New York are very rye heavy. So it's still a 51% at least, but you are a lot higher rye percentages than what you would have in Kentucky. So you're going to be a lot bolder, and the rye helps it age a little quicker. So it being a 4-year whiskey will taste a little bit better than a high corn 4-year whiskey coming out of Kentucky. So it's kind of designed that way to be a little different. So there's no really comparison between either one.
Yeah.
It's fun getting to see how stuff has evolved, because when I was at Buffalo Trace, I kind of laughed at craft distilling, and I was like, oh, that'll never take off. And I was like, how are they going to compete with 8-year-old whiskey? And now some of those craft distilleries are getting 8-year-old whiskey. So
yeah, they're catching up in terms of the aged products and things like that. But there's just something special about Kentucky, that's for sure. So I was just reading today this article, and I just thought it was cool. The Northern Kentucky, in 5 communities, they're having barrels painted that are going to kind of line the streets, kind of connecting businesses and stuff like that. And I just thought, it's just so cool how it's just ingrained into their culture. I mean, downtown areas with barrels lining the streets and stuff. It's just something special. And again, a great head start and those combination things. Kentucky's always the best, but that doesn't mean, I'll never say that's the only great place you can make, bourbon. You can make great bourbon other places, but the home of bourbon is Kentucky for sure. No doubt about it. That's cool. Last question for you. Again, we always like to do a fun one at the end. If you aren't drinking whiskey, what would be your backup? Are we talking, you might be a beer guy, rum, cocktails, something else? What do you tell us? What would be, if you didn't have any whiskey on hand, which I'm sure you always do, but theoretically, if you didn't, what would be your backup?
Yeah, so right now I have a pretty stock bar, and
I'm sure. Yeah.
So I mean, I drink a lot of beer because I know a lot of the beer guys up here within New York, just because where we have so many barrels that we're trying to get rid of after we use them. We're trying to find a second home for them. So I work with a lot of local breweries, giving them barrels. So just in that aspect, I get so much free beer from all those guys. But we also drink a lot of mezcal, and we do a lot of homemade cocktails. So we have a whole bar set up here at the house that we make some of the best cocktails that we can probably make in a home setup.
So I think the answer to your favorite favorite backup to whiskey is just yes. Yeah. Whatever it is, whatever beer, whatever. I get it. Well, Brandon, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate it. Let's hear a round of applause for Brandon for coming on and talking. Let's tell a little bit about it. We'll wrap this one up, as we always do, by talking about where people can find us. Brandon, we'll start with you. If people want to follow the journey of your company, or even you personally, we're fine with whatever you'd like to share. Okay.
Yeah. So you can follow us on Instagram at _distillery. You can find all of the updates there. We usually try to post a couple times a week. We'll definitely post anything that's new and upcoming. We'll have, like I said, those single malt and wheated bourbons should hopefully be this late fall area. So keep an eye out for those. But
that sounds good. All right, Maggie, how about you? Where can people find you?
Everywhere.
She's not lying.
So you can find me online at LouGirl502.com, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at LouGirl502. That's Lou as in Louisville. You can also find American Whiskey Magazine, AmericanWhiskeyMag.com, on Twitter at whiskey with an E magazine, and also on Instagram and the other one, Facebook, at American Whiskey Magazine.
All right. What about TikTok?
Yeah, no.
I mean, no, but for me either. I can't do that.
Leave that to the young folks.
That's what I say. I'm too old for that nonsense. The people will tell me, McNew got on for a while, but I think she already burned down all of it, right?
Yeah, it was a lot to keep up with. Like, you got to be on that thing like multiple times a day. I got a real job. I can't do the TikTok.
Terrible to me. Yes, no. Yeah. All right, McNew, how about you? Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at McNewABV.
All right, for me, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website, steveakeley.com. We've also got a company website. That thing's abvnetwork.com. That's the one you have to check out. Everything that we do is out there. All of our previous shows, we've got about 3,000 different podcasts that we've done. You can check all of those out and so much more at abvnetwork.com. McNew, anything else to say before we get out of here?
I would like to remind the audience to please hit that subscribe button for Bourbon Sasquatch on YouTube, where all of our shows will be posted. And when you're watching an episode, please give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, and share it. It helps new people find the show, which is very important to us. And next week, we'll be chatting with bourbon legend Jim Rutledge and Bourbon's Bistro Buzzards Roost master blender Jason Bronner.
Sounds pretty good. Sounds like fun. So we'll see you guys next week. One last round of applause for Maggie and Brandon. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Great job.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.